happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay Bad News. I'm Andy Hum.
I am Ann Northrup, wearing black in mourning, but with a little touch of white to indicate a small ray of hope.
We are eating dust this morning, taping Wednesday, the day after the elections, and we will talk about them because they were mostly an unmitigated disaster, but there are a few bright spots to talk about.
One, which had nothing to do with the election, was in Kansas, where a federal judge this week struck down the state's ban on same-sex marriage, although he's not letting it take effect quite yet.
Tim Cook has finally come out of the closet, the first and only Fortune 500 leader to come out.
A gay sportswriter has the proof, I can't wait to hear this, you know this, I don't, that Michael Sam was cut from the NFL because he is openly gay.
Several notable gay deaths to report, including the founder of National Public Radio, who also founded an early suicide prevention hotline, as well as a longtime friend of the Gay USA show. And
some non-gay friends of the gay community, too. In Ukraine, anti-gay activists set fire to a movie theater showing an LGBT film festival.
And in the spirit of the week, there's also bad news from Egypt, India, and Russia.
Lots of gay-themed movies are opening for the holiday season, someplace to drown your sorrows. We start with the election news.
You want the good news or the bad news first?
Probably the good news.
Now all we need is a Republican president, and we can return America to pre-Enlightenment society.
I admit that there are times when I wonder why I live in this country, given what the majority of the people seem to want. I have to wonder. But what they seem to want is change.
Change.
They are sick and tired of what's going on. They want change. They don't know any other way to accomplish it. They actually came out and voted in big numbers for change. I cannot, I can't criticize them for that.
The Democrats don't produce much change, partly because, you know, they had a Republican House and a lot of Republican legislatures around the country who are thwarting that. But we don't really have much of a Democratic Party anymore, and there's not much of a Republican Party anymore. 41% of people identify as independents, and they just swing all over the place and never get what they want.
Well, it's all devolved into big money, negative advertising, sound bites, rhetoric. It's not about accomplishing things anymore.
I mean, you know, people are not really proud of being Democrats anymore. Everybody knows about Allison Grimes in Kentucky, who lost to Mitch McConnell, who's going to be likely to be the new majority leader of the Republican Senate. But after the election, she wouldn't even say whether she voted for herself.
No. That was a joke.
That's a joke. Well,
no, but here, all right. Here's my somewhat Pollyanna-ish take. I do think people voted for change. I think they're fed up. They're sick and tired. They don't have a lot of choices to do better, and so they go out and they pull their hair out and rant and rave and cast protest votes.
In the 1950s, when African Americans first got the right to vote, I've told the story before, but they came to Thurgood Marshall, who won that right for them, who was the lawyer for the NAACP, and they said, "But Mr. Marshall, both the candidates are racist. What are we supposed to do?" And he said, "Vote the one that's in out. It keeps them guessing, and it keeps them off balance." I mean, what else are you supposed to do? So that's what the majority of the voters do.
Well, that is, I think, what they did this time. But there is a second answer to that, which is organize, come up with better candidates, and put them in office. You do ultimately have the power to make that change. It takes longer than what we did on Tuesday.
I feel fairly powerless. I live in New York State. You may think of it as a fairly liberal state out there. Governor Andrew Cuomo got reelected here, as did statewide Democrats all across. But we now have a Republican Senate again. And, you know, so the state has moved to the right. And
Andy,
Governor,
we had a Republican Senate even when the Democrats had the majority.
And Governor Cuomo has done his best to destroy the Democratic Party in New York. Democrats don't stick together loyally and all those kinds of things. And so that's why it's pretty depressing.
It is depressing, and it's a reminder that we of what we describe as a more progressive bent are a minority in this country and don't represent the majority viewpoint, and we have to come to grips with that.
And, you know, as has been pointed out, the electorate for these off-year elections, these midterm elections, is smaller, it's whiter, and it's older. So that means that, you know, fewer percentage-wise people of color voted, fewer young people voted, et cetera. And that's what and this is also what you get. But on the other hand, when George Bush was at this stage of his presidency and the Iraq War was considered a total debacle, he lost the midterm elections in 2006 and the Democrats took over.
It's a roller coaster. And I'm smaller, whiter, and older, and I didn't vote for the Republicans.
No.
All right, so
we are traitors to our age.
Let's give you a little good news. Well, I'm going to start with Dallas, where they took a vote on a proposed amendment to the city charter to
codify in the Constitution their gay rights law.
Yes.
And they did by a 77 to 23 margin.
And that's great news out of Texas, in spite of them electing Greg Abbott as governor. All the LGBT members of Congress, who are actually LGB, and in fact in the House are just GB, gay and bisexual, no lesbians in the House, were reelected. David Cicilline from Rhode Island, Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, Jared Polis from Colorado, Sean Maloney from New York.
And before you skip over Sean Patrick Maloney.
No, we'll come back to him.
Yes,
Let me finish the list.
Okay.
Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, Mark Takano from California. Half a dozen gay and bisexual members of the U.S. House of Representatives, every one of them reelected.
I mean, look.
Now you can talk about Sean.
Well, in terms of Sean Patrick Maloney's race, it was very close. It was only like a 1-point race, I believe.
He was running against the woman he had unseated 2 years ago in that district.
But at the end of the campaign, Nan Hayworth, who was not particularly pro-gay,
she's against any kind of national mandate for same-sex marriage.
Her young son does an ad for her. He's gay. He loves his mother. He's saying so in the ad. She comes on and kisses him, and they both endorse this message. Well, that was, I mean, again, a bit of false advertising in terms of the gay issue. But on the other hand, kind of a breakthrough for a Republican.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's why you lost, Nan, because you made that gay pitch at the end.
Well, who knows?
We don't know.
But it was very close.
Exit polls did not tell us.
Yeah. Now, the congressional gay candidates who lost, who were all newcomers trying to get into Congress, and every one of them lost. Clay Aiken in North Carolina, Democrat Richard Tassay in Massachusetts, Republican Al McCaffrey, Democrat in Oklahoma, Sean Eldridge, Democrat in New York, Louis Minor, Democrat in Texas. Those were the congressional candidates.
And then we don't know about the Carl DeMaio race in San Diego.
We do not yet know about Carl DeMaio,
a gay Republican.
Very close. Could go either way.
We're not done with Clay Aiken because they're going to make a reality. This is not a joke. They've made a reality TV show out of the campaign.
Why would I think it was a joke that they would make a reality show out of this?
Can't. You know, you ran that thing last week from the right wing.
I Stand Sunday.
And it looked like something from The Daily Show.
Yes.
It was so far out.
Well, it looked like a previous National Organization for Marriage thing about the gathering storm. It's that's their thing. It's very scare tactic. And more about that rally.
And by the way, many thanks to Chris Cooper for filling in last week.
Thank you, Chris.
I did have my operation last Tuesday, and I'm coming along. We even walked here today, we're feeling strong.
All right.
And thank you for all your good wishes out there. I really appreciate it.
More good
you
and
got
bad.
Me through.
More good and bad news from the election in Massachusetts. A very big win. Maura Healey, out lesbian, elected Attorney General of Massachusetts. That is the first out LGBT person to ever be elected to be an Attorney General of a state. She, by all reports, is a fantastic person and
good progressive.
And she won, even though Republicans in Massachusetts took the governorship.
We lost the lieutenant governor's race where we had an out gay candidate.
Yes, hold on, Steve Kerrigan. But Maura Healey broke through. There was a lot of ticket splitting around the country. As I looked at races around the country,
41% say they're independent. And Massachusetts has elected Republican governors 5 out of the last 7 times.
But as you look at states around the country, you find a lot of, they elected the Democrat in this race, the Republican in that race, and it was interesting because you don't usually see that much ticket splitting, I think. All right, so Maura Healey won in Massachusetts. That's a big one.
Well, in Maine, though, this Mike Michaud, who's was running for governor, who was out, lost to Paul LePage, who
he's a monster.
We got a big fill of Paul LePage because he was the one trying to lock up the Ebola nurse. And he's an idiot. Although Chris Christie said that was the highlight of election night for him, because this is a real guy.
Watch out. Chris Christie got a big bump out of this election, not because he was running for anything, but because he's the head of the Republican Governors Association, and he was in charge of getting these Republicans elected governor, and he had a lot of big wins this week in those governor races. And Mike Michaud lost in part because there was an independent running, Elliot Cutler, who got 8% of the vote, and that was a lot more than the difference between LePage and Michaud.
But we never know.
Cutler was a left-wing independent.
But you never know. We never know where the votes are going to go in three-way races.
Absolutely. But for all those people who like to blame Ralph Nader for Al Gore's loss, which I don't. This one looks a little more like that.
The vast majority of people do not vote, period. So that's the thing we've got to be concerned about, is we've alienated people from voting. You live in one of these states where they run these massive campaigns of money, of negative ads, and we don't want to vote for anybody. And people don't. They stay home.
I thought it was pretty shocking that Rick Scott beat...
Yep, it was close. Charlie Crist.
Thank you.
In Florida. Now, in North Carolina, and folks, I do want you to be prepared. More anti-gay stuff is going to be coming our way now. I mean, now that the Republicans are in charge in a lot of these places. A lot of stuff. We watch the show. We've given you a lot of good news over the last year, mainly judicial decisions and things like that.
Yeah.
And marriages, and this is a new era for gays, and it can all be taken away. Or much of it can be taken away. In North Carolina, and they beat Kay Hagan down there, who for Senate, and the Republican Party did an official anti-gay mailer against the homosexual agenda and special rights for homosexuals, such as living, breathing, working, and things like that. They didn't mention that, but that's what it was.
There were a lot of explicitly anti-gay ads around the country. They have not given up scapegoating us and attacking us directly.
Now, so what's the silver lining? Some people say...
I've got a few more races to announce here. In Idaho, out gay John McCrostick was elected to the State House. That now means that every state in the union has an LGBT person in the state legislature. I remember the days when it was like, we only have people in 30% of the states or 60% of the states. 100% of the states now have an out LGBT person in the legislature.
We remember when there weren't any.
Exactly. So that does make a real difference, and that's an important step, and especially at the state legislative level where things do get done. In L.A., Sheila Kuehl was elected one of the 5 supervisors of Los Angeles County, which is a big job there, and she had to beat Bobby Shriver of the Kennedy clan.
She's a former actress and great progressive.
Absolutely. And in Washington State, Mary Yu, who had been appointed to the state Supreme Court, out lesbian, was elected to the position, and that was a good thing.
And the South elected the first African-American senator since Reconstruction, but he's a Republican.
Oh, the guy from South Carolina
Scott,
who'd been appointed.
I think his name is.
Yeah.
Sorry if I got that wrong.
And a couple more losses. David Catania did not win the mayoralty in the District of Columbia.
Michael Petrelis did not win for supervisor in San Francisco. He got 7% of the vote. He's an old pal of ours from ACT UP and activism in New York. And
the progressive trans woman, Lauren Scott, who's a Republican but progressive, did not win the assembly seat in Nevada.
So what was the silver lining we were talking about? There is no silver lining. But there, what people...
Oh, here's my silver lining. Because this is a back and forth pendulum swing, to have the Republicans do this kind of sweep in the midterm election opens the possibility of a swing back to the Democrats in 2 years.
And certainly this demographic wave that everybody keeps talking about, you know, more Latinos, the country's becoming less white, and all this kind of stuff.
But Latinos are mad at the Democrats over immigration, and young people are now mad at the Democrats.
But be careful, because we're going into 2016 so you'll have a Republican Congress, and they're going to pass a lot of things, and Obama better veto some of them, a lot of them, and they're going to say, oh, see, the Democrats are the ones who are obstructing. Give us a Republican president so we can finish the job.
Oh.
And seriously, and who's the standard bearer for the Democratic Party? Old news Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought, Martin O'Malley might be an alternative to her, but of course, his lieutenant governor lost for governor of Maryland.
If viewers would like to suggest alternative places to live other than the United States of America, we are open to suggestions.
No, so some people are pointing to the fact that some progressive issues prevailed on the ballot. You mentioned the Dallas vote. Well, marijuana passed in Oregon, Alaska, and District of Columbia. Florida, no. But Tennessee voted in its constitution to give the legislature the power to enact more abortion restrictions by 51%, but it passed.
And a Tennessee Court of Appeals just turned down a challenge to the law passed by the legislature forbidding localities to pass non-discrimination laws for sexual orientation or gender identity.
On the other hand, minimum wage ballot initiatives passed in Arkansas, South Dakota, Alaska, and Nebraska. But these are also states where we lost Senate candidates in all cases. So, we use these things to bring out our vote, and it doesn't seem to work.
Well, the Republicans have promised they're going to fix all this, so maybe they will.
And in Pennsylvania, they knocked off Tom Corbett as the Republican governor, and this guy, Tom Wolf, won.
I hope he does well.
I hope so, too.
All right, let's move on to marriage news. And I start with a correction. I got a little confused and carried away last week when we put up a map of the federal circuits of the courts.
Yeah.
When I saw that Minnesota and Iowa were in the 8th Circuit, and I thought to myself, but they have marriage, and the 8th Circuit doesn't have marriage, and it got me all flamboozled.
Well,
but in fact, of course, Minnesota and Iowa are in the 8th Circuit, and they just happen to have legal marriage, but the other states don't yet.
I sadly wasn't here to not correct you. Because I usually defer to Ann.
My apologies.
Well, you also talked about, Jimmy Carter last week on marriage and how he came out again. He said the state should have the right to determine this.
Right.
But I think he was trying to help. You didn't mention that. I think he was trying to help his grandson, who was trying to get elected governor. It didn't work.
I don't think that's a reasonable excuse, but nice try. Now, the really big news in marriage is in Kansas, which is in the 10th Circuit, along with Colorado and Oklahoma and other states. And the deal there is that the 10th Circuit has decided for same-sex marriage rights. It's been appealed to the Supreme Court. That was one of the cases they refused to hear. Therefore, same-sex marriage should be legal in the entire 10th Circuit, including Kansas. So we've been trying to convince a court to say that, and the Kansas federal judge did agree.
Daniel Crabtree.
He said...
an Obama appointee.
He said...
There won't be any more of those, by the way. Federal judges will no longer be able to get confirmed if they're the least bit progressive. The Republican Senate can just say, no, give us somebody who is conservative or we're not filling the seat.
Hang in there, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
But everybody, we're not, this
is
I
agree.
This is probably the biggest disaster of this election, is that we can no longer get federal judges confirmed.
I agree. Anyway,
so he did
this judge legalized same-sex marriage, but he said, the right wing is still making technical arguments. It's not outside the realm of possibility that they could convince some court to agree with them, like they're requesting a full en banc rehearing of the marriage cases by the 10th Circuit. I have to give them time to at least make their plea, so they've got a week to try that, and then it's going to go into effect.
November 11th, it's supposed to, the temporary stay is supposed to be lifted.
Lifted, yes.
Yes.
Update from North Carolina, as we do various North Carolina news stories this week. We're now up to 6 of the 670 judicial magistrates who have resigned their jobs because of their objection to doing same-sex marriages.
That sounds pretty mean.
No, I think it sounds actually quite ethical, and I'm thrilled with them that they have seen that they have to quit their jobs.
I wish they would, as we've discussed on the show, I wish they would think through what their real objections are to this. Because, well...
their objections are religious.
No. But I mean, they come from, many of them come from religions where divorce is also prohibited, and yet they remarry divorced people and things like that. Seriously, that their objections aren't fundamentally biblical.
I would love to convince them that their objections are wrong and that they should change their minds.
Inconsistent is what I'm saying.
Given where they think they stand, the fact that they have walked away from their jobs is, I think, the honorable thing to do, rather than the people who are going to stay in their jobs and just commit some kind of civil disobedience by not doing the marriages.
Now, I was somewhat under the influence of painkillers this week. I tried to stick just to Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, and but did Ted Cruz really say, if a state wants to do same-sex marriage, I'm okay with it? If it's up to the state?
I believe so, but don't hold him to that.
Don't hold him to that?
I'm sure he's find
still against
something
us.
else to say, yes.
He doesn't really like us. He's one of our leading opponents. He still wants a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage.
Yeah, but as things stand, in South Carolina, that's another circuit, the Fourth Circuit, where marriage has been legalized and the Supreme Court turned down the appeal, but South Carolina is still one of the outlier states that has not officially agreed to same-sex marriage yet. So, and the governor, Nikki Haley, and others, and the attorney general are continuing to file suits against it to try to forestall it. But one thing cropped up where the Department of Motor Vehicles wouldn't recognize a married name from a woman who is married to her same-sex partner in another state and now living in South Carolina. So the ACLU and South Carolina Equality have filed suit on that.
Well, they're trying to defend the sanctity of marriage.
I guess so.
Now, what about Archbishop Chaput in Philadelphia, who was talking about stopping heterosexual marriages in churches there because...
Well, he says they should get out of the business of civil marriage.
I agree.
I agree with that too. But he's another one who's trying to assert that the church is going to be forced to perform same-sex marriages, and this is a base canard.
He's not going to.
They are not.
He's not.
But this is a bait and switch thing. This is
what we're going to be up against now that we are winning the marriage issue judicially, and we're going to be up against all these religious restrictions.
Sidebar: the 2.5 Men TV show has an episode this week where Ashton Kutcher and John Cryer are getting married, not because they are a gay couple.
But they do love each other.
But because they want to adopt a boy out of the foster care system. Why is it that they have to get married to do this? Single parent adoptions
You can do a single parent adoption, but if both people want to be the parent, you've got to be married, right?
Yes, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
I don't watch the show, so I don't know if that is their
I now
reason.
pronounce you Chuck and Larry. Look, people can use marriage for
Any number of reasons.
They've always said that 7% of heterosexual marriages in the old days were just for people getting benefits and things.
And we saw that when
if you
France
but you're taking on a lot of
legalized
responsibility as well for each other.
Exactly.
And if you're willing to do that, go right ahead.
Well,
you don't have to have sex.
Michael Bolton will be on the show to sing When a Man Loves a Man. And this is probably all tied to the fact that November is National Adoption Month.
But we hope they're not going to make fun of us. Because we're a little tired of that.
And those of you who watch the show,
it is a comedy show,
can let us know whether it turns into an excuse for fag jokes. You know, oh, we're not really gay. That kind of stuff.
So while I was away, I understand Tim Cook came out of the closet. Tim Cook is the head of Apple, the successor to Steve Jobs, but we've been speaking about him as gay since he got the job.
He's been on the most powerful gay people in the country list for years.
He never denied who he was.
Right.
I didn't think he was closeted, but apparently this is now his official announcement.
Yes.
So what do you think of the significance of this?
I think it's huge and much bigger than, these things always sort of take us a little by surprise because we did know for years that he was gay, and we were under the impression that he wasn't trying to hide it. I wouldn't have ever described him as closeted.
Right.
I would just describe him as not talking about it particularly. But we talked about him last week because he'd gone to his alma mater, Auburn University in Alabama. He was being honored in their academic hall of fame or something. And that's not the exact name. And he'd given this terrific speech about how Alabama had been behind on the civil rights movement, and that was shameful, and how dare they, and now they're behind on LGBT stuff. And it was a real wonderful speech,
now,
but Chris Cooper and I discussed last week, again, this question of whether or not he talked about being gay, because he didn't in the speech. And then the next day, he writes an essay for Bloomberg News and talks about how he feels he hadn't talked about it before, it wasn't a secret, but he could see that talking about it explicitly was important, and that he is proud to be gay, and he feels it's one of God's greatest gifts to him.
That's the key line there. That's going to really shake things up. It certainly shook things up in Russia, as we will show you.
Well, first of all, it did make a big impact in all the business news, all the newspapers across the country. Oh my, people don't pay attention to this stuff generally as much as we do. So we lose some touch with what people know or don't know. And
for years, people thought same-sex marriage was legal in Hawaii because they read about it. They heard about it somewhere back in the 90s. Oh, it's legal in Hawaii, isn't it? Oh, seriously, that's people's extent
whatever. That wouldn't have been.
Need to watch Gay USA.
That would not have been my example, but it became explosively big news, and a lot of discussion of how this would impact the rest of the business world, and whether it would be easier for people to be out now, and what effect this would have, for instance, in China, where Apple manufactures a lot of its products, and what would happen when Tim Cook goes to China and other places around the world. Apple is an international company. It is the biggest company in the world in terms of value, and this is a big deal to have him be out.
Let's show how they reacted in anti-gay Russia.
It turns
in Moscow.
out, no, St. Petersburg.
Well, I thought, all right.
It turns out that they, a few years ago,
it's St. Petersburg.
As a tribute to Steve Jobs, they had erected this statue of an iPhone at a college in St. Petersburg.
But that's an old iPhone. Steve Jobs wasn't gay, but look what they did to it.
It provides free Wi-Fi.
Let's go to the next. Oh! Dismantle it because Tim Cook came out. That's the reason they're dismantling this, folks. But, you shouldn't take it out on Steve Jobs.
Because it was public propaganda for sodomy. It's against the Russian law.
iPhone. Lots of sodomy on the iPhone.
And homosexuality is more dangerous than cigarettes or drugs. You don't think Tim Cook's coming out had an impact? There you go. Milanov, the right-wing crazy legislator in Russia, wants to keep Tim Cook out of Russia now. Ban him from Russia.
Milanov is a right-wing crazy, but the anti-gay law in Russia passed unanimously. Well, there was one person who abstained.
Yeah, that's what happens in Russia. So we'll see whether Tim Cook gets into Russia or not, or wants to go, or doesn't want to go, or what impact this has. But this is now something people are going to have to grapple with. You know, Ted Cruz said, I may not agree with him, but I love my iPhone.
That's true. So you're not very principled, Ted.
He didn't destroy his iPhone.
You're supporting a gay-led company.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Well.
All right, so in Houston, they did hold the hate fest known as I Stand Sunday on Sunday, and all the usual suspect people showed up with thousands of people at this rally.
The out mayor there, Anise Parker, out lesbian, she dropped her subpoenas to get speeches from pastors who opposed the gay rights ordinance.
The audience for this rally showed up with T-shirts saying, "We reserve the right to refuse service to homosexuals." Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe, but it's against the law.
Not everywhere. Get Equal showed up, held a press conference the day before with some local pastors to put out the word that not everyone who proclaims a religious bent is against LGBT people, and they performed some good works on Sunday to try to change the image here.
And then there's Governor Butch Otter, who just got reelected in Idaho. Now, he had a Halloween party, and gay activists brought their add the 4 words, they want sexual orientation and gender identity in the state law protected, to his party there. He didn't like that. But apparently did say that even though he's fighting same-sex marriage, he says he would sign the anti-discrimination bill.
Oh, that would be nice. In Virginia, there's a new group called Virginia Mass Resistance.
Oh, yeah.
They're not a progressive group. They're a right-wing group. And they made a big deal out of outing the interim health commissioner appointed by Governor Terry McAuliffe, Dr. Marissa Levine. She is a transgender woman. She was already out. Her identity was made explicit when she was appointed to the job, but now they've decided to try to make a big deal out of it.
Tim Cook's gay, too.
A little nice note from Texas. 5 mental health professionals sent a letter to all the licensing boards for mental health professionals, asking them to ban reparative therapy for minors.
So here's the analysis on Michael Sam from Sid Ziegler of Outsports, a longtime out-gay sportswriter. Basically, it's a disparate impact argument, meaning, it's not like, somebody said we're not going to have that gay around, but here's what he promised
proof.
Here's what he did. He did an analysis of what happened to every single big-time conference defensive player of the year drafted since 2000. And they all made the NFL rosters in their rookie season except Michael Sam. And Sid says it's because Sam is gay. That there can be no other reason. He said that they have promoted even this season many more mediocre players to rosters with far worse records than Michael Sam. He says in other words, what he's saying is there can be no other reason other than they don't want this kind of a distraction on the team.
Well, I certainly believe that's part of it, but the comparison I would like to see is of their performance and of their size. The knock against Sam has been he's too small, he's too slow. So I want to look. I'm willing to believe all of this.
He was rated a 90 in the draft, and he got like 200 and something in the draft.
He was next to last in the draft.
That's the kind of
stuff.
But
the excuse was too small, too slow. That's the comparison.
All the NFL execs were in the background. They're going, "No, you do it. Now you pick him. I know you pick him. Somebody's got to. You got somebody. Like, here's the money. Pick him." Anyway.
Okay.
All right, in San Diego, the police are cracking down, or have cracked down, on scantily clad gay people at the Pride celebrations, but not on beaches and not during something called the On the Line tournament, where a lot of this happens. So a gay guy who was in a leather kilt who got arrested in the 2011 parade is suing the city over this.
For disparate impact.
There you are.
Yeah. Well, let's memorialize some important people we lost this week.
Well, okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, do we want to tell this story first?
Oh,
We have this
okay.
Well, let's talk about some crime stories first. I mean, we told you about the assault on Kimmy Hartman. We have Kimmy's picture there, a trans woman. This was mid-October, who sustained brain injury in Bushwick, Brooklyn on October the 12th in an anti-trans attack. They also called her a faggot. She's left the hospital just now, but she is going to now require 24-hour supervision at home and 10 medications a day, requires additional neurosurgery, and no arrests have yet been made in the case.
Terrible story. Also terrible story was the poor college student, the gay guy who was killed in a hazing attack on a bus.
Yep, at Florida A&M.
Yeah. And they prosecuted several people, and they convicted the ringleader. Now, have they given him guilty of manslaughter in the death? It was a hazing in 2011.
The name of the band member who was
Dante
killed,
Martin,
27.
The jury deliberated only 1 hour. I don't see a sentence yet.
Robert Champion was the guy who was killed, rather.
Dante Martin
is
was
the
killer.
perpetrator.
Yeah.
Robert Chapman was the drum major who was Champion. Robert Champion.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Just
Well,
kidding.
at least they followed
to
through
work.
on the prosecutions.
Which is rare
also,
in these hazing incidents.
In East Indianapolis, Indiana, another murder of a transgender woman.
Ashley Sherman.
Yes.
It's part of a wave of murders of trans women across the country. The police are investigating this. Last week, 100 people attended a vigil at the spot where she was killed in Indianapolis.
All right, so we lost a number of important people last week. I want to start with Boston Mayor Thomas Menino.
Sure.
Who was a hero in Boston, served for decades.
20 years.
Was beloved by the community, but particularly beloved by the gay community in Boston because he was an early, fervent supporter of our rights. In 1994, 20 years ago, he refused to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade when they rejected an LGBT contingent. He gave benefits to the same-sex partners of city employees. He was a major force in stopping when same-sex marriage was legalized in Massachusetts in 2003 by the state Supreme Court on the grounds that Massachusetts had a non-discrimination law, the legislature tried to get rid of that decision.
And they only needed about 50 votes to get it on the ballot or something.
It was a huge battle, and that we won by the skin of our teeth. And Menino was a major factor in holding on to same-sex marriage for us by, I was about to say strong-arming, let's say forcefully convincing members of the legislature not to sign on to a referendum effort or repeal or anything like that. He was strongly in our corner.
Well,
he even went a little overboard in issuing statements against the homophobia of Chick-fil-A a year or two ago. He was pro same-sex marriage. He held the gay prom at City Hall. He facilitated the establishment of needle exchange. He set up a fund for liver transplants for HIV-positive patients, and he was a force for condoms in city schools.
Yeah.
He was just a true blue friend. It's a great loss, and he
died too young.
Complete
I think
friend
he was only
of
about
ours.
71.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Cancer. So that's one.
All right. Well, we lost a friend of the show this past week, Frank Merlino. name you may not know. He was a former non-cop leader of the Gay Officers Action League, which is it's the organization for gay cops, but also other people in uniformed services, and a great friend and resource to the show. You know, he kept us apprised of things happening with police across the country.
We'd get regular emails from him filling us in on the nuances of those stories. We really relied on him.
He died on his 75th birthday on Saturday and is survived by his partner of 53 years and his husband of 3 years, Steve Feldman. So rest in peace, Frank.
And thank you for all you've done for everybody, and including us. We lost a big activist in Charlotte, North Carolina. Don King, 72 years old, pancreatic cancer. He was a journalist. He did a local cable show called Gay Lesbian Forum. He'd been an activist since the 70s. He fought police harassment, again, beloved in his community.
And then somebody I had the pleasure of meeting once, Bernard Mays. We have a picture of him at the age of 85. He was a former Anglican priest and BBC correspondent, and then he moved to the United States. He was the founding chair of National Public Radio, which a lot of you subscribe to or follow. But in 1961, he was the founder in San Francisco of a suicide prevention line that led to many others and to national ones. He had a long stint at the University of Virginia, where I had gone to school, and I met him at a reunion, and we were talking about PBS because I was doing a PBS show at the time. He said, "PBS, home to master race theater," he said. Well, it's always stuck. It's such a great line. He was very dismissive of where public radio and public television had gone.
Couldn't agree more. With a few exceptions.
Bernard Mays, 85.
And David Armstrong?
Was 60 years old. He was a great photographer of subcultures. We have a picture of him. We should probably be more fun to show some of his photographs. But he included a lot of gay male subjects.
That's a pretty fun picture.
If he found a man to be beautiful, he'd like to photograph him. He was a great pal from almost from his teens with Nan Golden, and they were allies in the in that photography movement. And did you mention Stephen Moore last week, the pilot?
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, we did.
You did.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Head of the Gay Pilots Association.
Right, in a crash.
Huge loss, young guy. All right, a little bit of good news from West Virginia, where the Republicans have taken complete charge. A school board there has made Guyan Valley Middle School reinstate a lesbian teacher they had fired. That seems unlikely, but wonderful. And the Williams Institute has come out with a new study that says a quarter to a half of transgender people are parents. The vast majority have good relationships with their kids, but some of them, of course, have problems with outside professionals. So, again, breaking some stereotypes there. All right, international news.
All right. Well, again, a lot of bad news to report. In India, in Bangalore, a wife has brought criminal charges against her husband who wasn't interested in sex with her. So
it was an arranged marriage.
Well, a lot of that. And she used hidden cameras to get him charged with, and here's the charge, carnal intercourse against the order of nature with a man, woman, or animal. That's the crime. His was with a man. The High Court there, don't forget, has upheld the 1861 law against sodomy. Yeah. And she said her husband also used pink lip gloss daily, which could be a little bit of a signal there.
In Egypt, 8 men have been sentenced to 3 years each in prison. They were caught on video at what was seen as a same-sex wedding.
Seen as like the first same-sex wedding in the country or something.
And the video sort of went viral, and so the cops tracked them down and arrested them. Now, homosexuality is not illegal in Egypt.
It might as well be.
Because they were charged with inciting debauchery and offending public morals.
And spreading indecent images. So it's pretty easy to get people there.
A lot of those kinds of arrests going on in Egypt now as it swings farther and farther to the fundamentalist right.
Another one in India, in Chandigarh, rather, I'm sorry. A Bollywood actor, Amir Khan, a woman brought a petition against him because she said his show promoted homosexuality because he discussed gay people and eunuchs on the show, and he asked viewers to repeal the sodomy laws and support gay rights. So she's brought this petition against him under this same kind of anti-gay law there to try to get him, and he's standing by what he did.
In Ukraine, in Kiev, a movie theater was showing a gay movie, Summer Nights, as part of a film festival, and people showed up and burned it to the ground.
Well, they threw a smoke bomb, and they said, "Oh, we didn't mean to start a fire. We just wanted to bust up the place. We didn't want it." So the theater was it's an historic theater, was very badly damaged. And 2 days later, they did another screening as part of this gay film festival, and protesters showed up to bust it up, and at least the police stopped them in that case. They're all part of a far-right anti-gay group.
Absolutely.
Ukraine.
And in Slovakia, the Constitutional Court, not outside hooligans, the Constitutional Court has approved a referendum. They will let people vote on restricting any rights for LGBT people, no marriage, no adoption, no sex education. So we can look forward to the results of the vote in Slovakia.
Bad news from Manchester, England, which is considered a gay enclave.
It is?
Yeah, it's a big gay. It promotes itself as a gay-friendly city.
Okay.
They've got a big gay village there and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, two gay guys, friends, get on the bus. Well, they are on the tram and they're singing show tunes from Wicked. This is what marks them as gay, and they get the crap beat out of them. We have a picture of them there.
Well, one guy starts yelling at them on the tram and calling them faggot and everything, and then they get off the tram, and he gets off the tram, and he calls to the crowd of 15 thugs nearby, and they all come beat him up, and they end up in the hospital.
And what more bad news from Denmark, where a lesbian couple in the small town of Mariager were so harassed over their sexual orientation, as you point out, by one person who has been arrested, but they got threatening notes, dog crap thrown at their windows. The guy's been arrested for vandalism. But activists from Copenhagen bust themselves in and are going to show support for them.
In Armenia, a newspaper published the names of 50 homosexual lobbyists. You think this only happens in Africa. This is Armenia. So gay activists sued the newspaper for this, but the court rejected the suit. The government supports the newspaper for publishing these names. And the government has announced they are withdrawing their application to join the European Union. Instead, they're aligning with a new Russian union.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bad news.
Not good. And the Vatican had an interesting story, perhaps in reaction to what was seen as a slightly liberal synod on the family, even though they
started talking about it.
Yes. So now the real reactionaries in the Vatican are convening a meeting of various representatives of various religions on marriage and the family. Rick Warren is going.
Yes, even the Southern Baptists are going to align themselves with the Catholics in their hatred of gay people.
Mm-hmm. The right-wing Nigerian bishop is going. They're bringing all the right-wing crazies to the Vatican.
The aforementioned Archbishop Chaput from Philadelphia said the recent Vatican conference produced confusion, and confusion is of the devil, he said. The devil. Confusion.
Well, isn't that the point of religion, to take complexity out of life and give people something, rules to live by?
I guess so.
And the promise of eternal life if they follow the rules?
The Justice Minister of New Zealand does not seem to have respect for the old rules. She is looking to expunge the records of men convicted under the anti-gay sex law that became obsolete in 1986. I think there ought to be a movement to do that here.
Absolutely, and everywhere.
The only one they've forgiven is Alan Turing. More about whom later.
Well, that's one step. All right. Let us segue into AIDS news with an international AIDS story. Yemen. AIDS hysteria has hit Yemen. again, this may be
It's a little late.
Well, this may be
Been
a
around
way
for
in
a long
which
time.
we are a little naive about what's going on in the rest of the world. It has become routine for us to live with HIV among our friends and family and ourselves or whatever, and we don't think twice about it.
A lot of the stigma is gone, although we are in an age where a lot of people who have HIV do not disclose because they're in good health.
Right. But, you know, we're well aware of the Ebola hysteria, but I don't think we've thought about HIV hysteria for a while. But in Yemen, patients infected with HIV are being ordered out of hospitals in Yemen, even when they are in dire need of care, according to a new report from Human Rights Watch.
How did this get started?
I don't know how it got started, but here are some cases. A woman in labor in need of a cesarean section was thrown out of a private hospital.
Oh, boy.
A woman suffering from seizures was ordered out of a large public hospital by a doctor shouting in front of everyone in the emergency room that she had HIV. And her husband was detained by hospital staff and threatened with prosecution on charges of concealing his wife's infection. And when patients with HIV get care at private clinics, they're charged double or more the normal rates because the clinics know that public hospitals will not treat them. HIV.
This whole show is making me very sad. Well, I'm not sorry I came back.
No,
there was some.
I am in black.
There was some some, I guess you could say it's some good HIV news. In Los Angeles, Flex Spa, Bathhouse, and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which I'm not too fond of, though, are installing vending machines for quick HIV tests, and they're free.
Yeah.
And you can learn your status in minutes from a test. Now, people can buy these.
It's the Aura Quick in-home 20-minute HIV test. And they're going to give surveys along with the testing. I get a little nervous about these quick tests on the grounds that you might sort of surreptitiously test your potential partner. And it's just my fantasy scenario.
Okay.
I'm less worried about it than I used to be. So Ebola is panic city these days, and there's been a lot of debate about these harsh quarantines imposed particularly by some governors like Christie and Cuomo and others around the country. So AIDS activists have actually been the ones stepping up saying, you know, we have some experience of this hysteria and we know how unnecessary it is. Caution, of course, safety first, but unnecessary quarantines, no. So AIDS activists in New York held a demonstration last week, Act Up Against Ebola, Stigma Spreads Disease. And it's true that all this hysteria just makes it harder for people to be treated, makes people go into hiding.
People won't go to Liberian restaurants in Jamaica, Queens now. They're become ghost towns.
And they won't go to, and in Staten Island, too, where there's a large Liberian population, and kids in the Bronx are getting
we should go out
Ebola
there.
bashed.
Well, it's on the front pages, and it's the top of the news every day, and kids are cruel.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing it.
Well, here's some more cruelty. In Chicago, cops went into a workplace and arrested, just grabbed, didn't even arrest, an HIV-positive guy. They detained him for 48 hours. He was not arrested. He was being investigated for having sex without disclosing his HIV status. And it turns out that there is some legal way in which, in Chicago anyway, and maybe elsewhere, the cops can just do a sort of preventive detention without any judicial procedure. And just grab people and throw them away for a couple of days.
You know, there's a whole national project, our friend Sean Strube, on against HIV criminalization.
Yeah.
And people can read about that online if they want to fight this.
A viewer asked us to be, us meaning me, to be a little more precise. Our top story last week was about this new study that taking Truvada in a particular way could prevent infection if you took 2 pills 2 to 24 hours before having intercourse and 1 a day for the next 2 days. But as the viewer
as opposed to taking it all the time.
Yes, every day as
that's the big breakthrough.
Yeah, or try to rush off to a clinic or a hospital or a drugstore after you discover you've had unprotected sex, and trying to take it on an emergency basis. Have it handy
for post-exposure prophylaxis.
Yes. But as the viewer pointed out, that it's not just for unprotected sex. You do need to use condoms too, and you would use Truvada as part of a protection program.
And other drugs are also used.
Post-exposure can be not just Truvada, but other drugs. So there are nuances.
Learn
to
about
this.
all these things if you are in any way at risk.
Yes. And there is a forum on Tuesday, November 18th at the LGBT Community Center here in New York on West 13th Street, 6:30 p.m., November 18th, long-term survivors and older adults living with HIV and AIDS.
And on November 18th, I'm going to be moderating a forum at the LGBT Community Center about homeless LGBT youth.
Oh, that's already set.
What's going on with them? Yeah, it's at 8 o'clock on November 18th. So they're competing.
This is at 6:30, so you can spend the evening at the community center doing both.
All right.
Entertainment news.
Well, I just noticed in reading all the upcoming sections about how many holiday movies are having gay themes, including one that's opening up this week called The Way He Looks from Brazil, about a teenage boy in Brazil who was blind and the boy at school as they fall in love. It's getting nice notices. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen any of these movies yet, but watch for them. On November 28th, The Imitation Game, about the British World War II codebreaker Alan Turing. This is getting Oscar buzz for Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes, very good talk.
He died in 1954 after persecution for homosexual acts. And December 5th, something called Life Partners, which asks the question, can a straight girl and a lesbian be best friends? Starring Leighton Meester and Gillian Jacobs.
Of course they can be friends.
Well, it asks the question.
There is a documentary film festival coming up in New York. DocNYC.net is where you can get details. A lot of gay content. Back on the board, Greg Louganis is one documentary, the Case Against State documentary about the Prop 8 case in California, and something called Do I Sound Gay, which was an experiment a guy did. That's November 13th through 20th. Go to docnyc.net for details about those films.
So it's great to be back in the saddle, but I want there to be better news next week.
We'll try to arrange that for you, Andy, but thank you for coming back.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you again to Chris Cooper for sitting in. Thank you to all of you for watching,
yes.
And the struggle continues. See you next week.
It's just going to get a little harder.
Yeah.
A lot harder.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I see that the...